Hello and welcome to the Austin Jazz Society Conversations with the Hall of Fame. My name is Christian Wiggs. I have served as the producer on this series, and as a part of its mission, the Austin Jazz Society recognizes and honors the legacy of those local individuals who have made a positive contribution to the jazz art form. Each year, the Society nominates and selects candidates to be recognized and inducted into the Austin Jazz Society Hall of Fame. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Society arranged for individual conversations with those living Hall of Famers as a way of capturing their thoughts and influences affecting their love of jazz. We are very thankful to have Rabbi Neil Blumofe, recognized jazz aficionado and historian, conduct these interviews. We hope these interviews will give a sense of commitment, history, contributions, and personal love for America's own art form, jazz.
Well, it's an honor to be having this time with you and other Hall of Fame participants in the Austin Jazz Society. And I just wanted to ask you, you're from Denton and you made your start there. I know you got picked in high school to be part of a lab band at North Texas. But tell me about that experience and then your decision to turn down a full scholarship and come to Austin is interesting. So just tell us about your coming up and who you are and how you got started and what brought you to Austin.
The growing up in Denton was fantastic. It's a fantastic place to be from. And I got a call from my high school band director, Carol McMath, saying you should take this opportunity because Leon Breeden called. They're starting a second summer lab band and they're one trombone player short. And I was a sophomore in high school. And so that was a fantastic opportunity for me to play with guys like Bones Malone, Lou Marini from the Blues Brother movie, Sal Marquez, John Thomas, many other young guys at the time at North Texas. And to see Stan Kenton or Woody Herman walk in the rehearsal and then next day it's like, where's the alto player? He's gone on the road. So that was fantastic. But for me, I didn't understand what North Texas was. I thought it was just the local college. So I had been to Austin to come down for Boys State. And that was a fantastic experience. Before that, I'd been down here to visit my brother. And I fell in love with Austin the first time I drove across the city limits. So I couldn't wait to get down here to the University of Texas, march in the Longhorn Band, and I expected the UT Jazz Ensemble to be twice as big as the North Texas Jazz Lab Band program. But I was shocked to find out that the Lab Band program here was just getting started. So I came in with a lot of experience as a freshman, and it was not what I expected, and I came down with a scholarship, but I gave up the scholarship the very first day of class because the music department didn't want me to be in the Longhorn Band or the Jazz Ensemble. And it's like, well, I don't really want to be a band director, so I just looked for a short line and said, well, I'll get in that line. So I was a psych major for my first 2 semesters, and then switched over to business. I got a business degree.
Well, let's back up a little bit. How'd you get to trombone?
The very first time I ever climbed up into Sarah Jane Gasson's treehouse. She had the treehouse right behind the Denton Bronco football field. And the adults could get up in the treehouse and watch the football game from the end zone view because it was a football stadium, then a creek, and then her backyard. And so the very first time the adults came down at halftime and the kids went up, and I saw that front line of trombones coming down. I go, that's what I want to do. I want to play football. So when I was 10 and you show up to pick your instrument and stuff, it's like, I want to see a trombone. That's it. Well, here's no, sax, no, trombone. That's it.
Wow, that's an amazing image from your childhood.
Yeah, but I remember the trombones the very first time I saw them, and the whole front row of the Bronco band coming down the length of the field, and it's like, man, I want to do that.
Now, you got to Austin then, must have been sort of towards the mid-'60s, I think. Is that correct?
68, towards the end of the 60s, yeah.
What was that like, being at the university in that time period? That must have been really something.
Well, the city of Austin was only like 50,000 people, and the University of Texas was like 40,000. So when the students left, this place was a ghost town. And I reflect back, when we were sitting around going like, during spring break, we need to do something to have gigs going on around spring break. And that's when South by Southwest got started later in the 80s. And, but it was completely different. I mean, Congress Avenue, the downtown was dying. 6th Street was dead. There was the club scene. There was a new highway way south of town called Ben White Boulevard. And that's where they had Nero's Nook. And so that was in a strip mall where the laser tag is now. And that was a cool club. And then you had Eli's Club, where Threadgills became, way north of town on Lamar. And then you also had the New Orleans Club near Symphony Square downtown. You also had the One Night. And then there was the Psychedelic Rock Club. What was it called? Where all the psychedelic rock was going on. Rocky Erickson and those guys. The Electric Company or something like that, they called it. It was a famous place. And then Armadillo started in 1970.
Now, did you start playing right away out in the city, or were you just sort of sequestered at the university? It sounds like you were doing some club stuff, but when did you start playing out?
For me, there's two levels there. One was one day a long-haired hippie walked into the jazz ensemble and said, "You want to be in our rock and roll band?" And I said, "It's a trombone." And he turned me on to this new band called Chicago. And I went, whoa, my mind was blown. Jimmy Pankow and the horn section there. And it was like, that's awesome music. And so we started a band and we thought about calling it Austin, but we thought that was a little too blatant of a ripoff. So we named the band Zilker Sunday. And the horn section was from the jazz ensemble. And my roommate was Paul Ostermeyer, saxophone player. And Paul lives in New York now, and did a short stint with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and is a fantastic saxophone player. So he was in Zilker Sunday with me. Now, Paul and I also took a jazz improv course, and so we went to find James Polk at the inspirational guy at UT, and we're really the two reasons I came to UT were Vincent Ardanino with the Longhorn Band, who was a legendary force of nature, and Dick Goodwin. And Dick Goodwin was the founder of the UT Jazz Ensemble. And Dick's approach to music versus Leon Breeden's approach to music was night and day. Leon was get better or get out, and it's a competition. And with Dick Goodwin, he brought the joy of music and inspired a whole generation of us, including John Mills, Mitch Watkins, Spencer Starnes, John Traynor, Ron Brown, who went on to play with Diana Ross, Rob Lockhart, And when Dick left town, he went to South Carolina, and it continued to inspire guys like Greg Wilson, who moved here, along with Jim Worth. Jake Lampa was in that sphere of the Dick Goodwin influence in Carolina. So being around a genius and an inspirational character like that, he said, go find James Polk on the east side. He's got something called a jam session. So we went to the jam session on the east side and went up to Dr. Polk and handed him our little blue mimeograph sheets for How High the Moon and another jazz standard. And we were so impressed that he had them memorized. And I remember we were kind of making our excuses, saying, well, he says, and to me, I remember he said, young man, music is not a competition. Everybody has something to say. So at a jam session, when it's your turn, you just stand up there, you blow your horn, and you say what you have to say, then shut up and sit down. So,
and that's how it started?
That was another moment of that divine touch. So with the luck of starting the jazz, of the hippie walking in the jazz society, the jazz ensemble, the inspirational touch of Dick Goodwin, and the inspirational touch early on of James Polk. Another giant on the Austin music scene in the 60s, there were big bands, because when you think the popular music and the guys who are 50 years old they're driving the boat now, right? And so they're having the bank Christmas parties and all that stuff. So in 1970, you would think back, 25 years to 1945, and then that would take you to the Glenn Miller big band era. So every bank had a Christmas party and a big band, and there were several big bands. And the Nash Hernandez big band was kind of like a farm team for the UT Jazz Ensemble guys. And I played my first professional gig with Nash Hernandez. John Mills' first professional gig, Nash Hernandez. Mitch Watkins' first professional gig in Austin with Nash Hernandez. Paul Ostermeyer, Steve Zirkle, first professional gig, Nash Hernandez. So he had a lot of gigs with his big band. He was always calling Dick for the young hot players to come out and play with his band. And at the time, all those gigs paid $15, and were just total learning experience and a lot of fun.
So how did you get from there to Bento and the Fairlanes and John Mills times 10? Was that a natural progression?
It's all an organic, natural progression, because Zilker Sunday got going and we got very popular. And a guy coming through LA, on his way to LA from the East Coast, thought he had discovered the new Chicago, put us in the studio. Then the band broke up while we were in the studio. And so I was trying to get the band reformed, and this new kid, John Mills, he's real smart. And so I wanted him to be in the band with me. I said, you take care of the music, I'll take care of the business. We'll get Zilker Sunday going again. But I had also tried to get my booking agency going at that time. And as the divine guidance steps in from time to time, and Dick Goodwin contracted a gig for the opening of a restaurant with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra led by Buddy Morrow. Buddy Morrow got snockered, didn't know what city he was in. And while I thought I was going to be taking over the gig, and wound up taking over the gig, moving the band inside from where had been out cold. The owner of the restaurant noticed what was going on, offered that to be my very first booking account. He asked me to manage his music at the Feedlot restaurant. And that was the restaurant closest to the lakes, which led to me booking the music at Lakeway, Lago Vista, Point Venture, and Horseshoe Bay. And then I was trying to break into the hotels, and in the audition process of rebuilding Zilker Sunday, we had discovered a couple of guys who had worked some lounges in Houston, John and I had. And so the manager of the hotel called me. He hadn't even returned any of my calls. Finally, he called me and he says, I need a band tonight, because the lead singer of my band had to go to the hospital with an appendix erupted. I go, yeah, okay, sure. So I called John. I said, how about we get those guys from Houston, David Deaton and Jim Spector, and just go play tonight only, and make $50 a piece. And they'll do what they do. We'll get Paul Piercy, our drummer, we had selected to be with Zilker Sunday, and we'll all make $50. And there you go. So I called, John said, yeah, we can do that. So I called Don George, the manager of the Villa Capri Hotel. I said, we can be there. And he said, what's the name of the band? I go, Starcross, like one night only, Starcross lovers kind of a thing, you know. So that's how Starcross got started. Zilker Sunday, when it broke up, Paul Ostermeyer went into a real jazz vein, going with the band 47 Times Its Own Weight. Have you heard of that band? Do you know anything about that band?
Just the title. I don't know much about it, no.
Well, when you interview Robert Skiles, if he remembers, jokingly, lovingly, he's always been a spacey guy. He was in 47 Times Its Own Weight with Paul Ostermeyer. And they also became very popular. Starcross then, when we finished that one night gig, the manager came up and said, can you guys finish out their 2-week run? So we did. And by the end of that 2 weeks, Starcross was a valid band. And we later added my girlfriend at the time, Liza Farrow, a singer. If you ever saw the movie Out of Africa, she did all the vocal work in that movie. And so those two bands were taken off. And then I read a book by Clive Davis called Inside the Record Business. And I decided, in that book, he said, he predicted a fusion. The next big thing in music would be a fusion between jazz and rock. And that's what Starcross was doing. Once John started writing original material, it was like turning on a faucet. Every week he's coming in with tunes all the time. And they're all great tunes. And we're playing the Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Corpus Christi circuit with our band. 47 Times Its Own Weight playing their band. So I read this thing by Clive Davis. I look up the address and say, 61,000 Sunset Boulevard. So John and I and David get in my van with a double bed in the back, drive straight out there. 24 hours later, we check into the Sunset 8 Motel on Sunset Boulevard. I go down to the Arista Records, was a brand new record company Clive Davis just started. Walked in and said, hi, I'm Mike Mordecai from Austin, Texas, and I'm here to see Clive Davis. Here's my demo tape. And the girl behind the desk, Diana Zuniga, turns out to be Miles Zuniga's sister. She says, well, Mr. Davis's office is actually in New York. Long story short, I finally decided to come home, and we decided to start our own record company, which we did, but I'd gotten some advice to get, if you're going to start a label, you needed 3 acts. So Tomas Ramirez, Jazzmanian Devil, and Ron Brown had been playing with this band called Steam Heat, now known as Extreme Heat. And so really all 3 of those bands had direct ties back to the UT Jazz Ensemble, and back to Dick Goodwin, and back to, James Polk, and it was all very organic. Bento and the Fairlanes, Bento lived next door to Neil Bork, who was the DJ for KUT. And Armadillo had just started, and Turk Pipkin and Henry Gonzalez had talked about a play that they want, a stage play they wanted to produce on the stage at Armadillo based on the wedding day of Pancho Villa. And so they asked Robert, Dude, as he was nicknamed, if he wanted to write the music. Well, Robert had fallen in love out of high school with a Mexican girl and had asked her to from Mexico, and went down there to ask her father for her permission to marry his daughter. And he said, no way. So this unrequited love, the wedding day of Pancho Villa, gave Robert the opportunity to write the song. And the first song he wrote was this beautiful song. It's on our first record called Silviana. And then he written 10 songs, and he lived next door to Fred Bork. He was explaining to Fred what was going on. And I read all this music that nobody would ever hear now. And Fred said, well, we got this brand new recording studio at UT called Studio 1A. And we're going to need some guinea pigs to go in there and make noises and test out the system. Why don't you call some friends to come down and you record these songs there? So we were the first band, I think, to play Studio 1A. And Bento was just passing out charts, and we had like 6 saxophone players and 2 trumpet, like he didn't even remember who he called to play. And so we're trying to figure out where to stand to play it all. And the recording turned out to be pretty good, and they started playing on the radio. And people started asking, and then Fred said, what do you want to call this band? And so Bento just made up the name on the spur of the moment and thought that rather than, Johnny and the Firebirds or something like that, he called it Bento and the Fairlanes, like a Ford Fairlane family car, 4-door sedan kind of a thing. And he thought that was appropriate. And that's how the band got started. And Fred started playing on the radio, and we had airplay before we ever had a gig. And then Liberty Lunch opened. We played our first gig at Armadillo World Headquarters. But when Liberty Lunch opened, I went over there for a hamburger and saw Shannon Sedgwick. And she took me out in the back and showed me the lumberyard. And I said, yeah, it's a perfect stage. And I got this band that could play there, but just play for the door. And that was the way Bento and the Fairlanes launched our career. And our first gig, we made $2, split between 8 guys. And, a month later, we were all walking out of there with like $50 or $75 every week. And then that later grew to where we were making like the band was grossing like $1,500 every Thursday for a few years there. And then that led to a steady residency gig on Wednesday nights at Rockefeller's in Houston, and a residency gig in Dallas at Nick's Uptown in Dallas. And then every weekend we'd either go to Corpus Christi or Santa Fe. And we'd literally get out of our gig on Thursday night after Liberty Lunch and drive to Santa Fe and play there the next day.
Oh my goodness. How long did that last? That kind of rhythm?
That lasted over 2.5 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And many funny stories where Bento would, we would always say in a Roadway Inn in Houston, Roadway Inn in Dallas. And one night we went to the Roadway Inn in Dallas, and they go, no reservations. Reservations were at the Roadway Inn in Houston.
Well, yeah, you can certainly compress a life in that way. And then your management and booking company kind of took off, and over the years, you've been involved in bookings, not only at the Elephant Room, which I want to talk to you about in a moment, but the contracting for Paramount and UT, the Bass Concert Hall, Long Center. What is that like to have your finger on the pulse of so much in Austin, Texas?
Once again, it was a very organic thing, and it was definitely being at the right place at the right time and being prepared. I did have a business degree, and I did have a good sense of organization and things like that. When I came here to UT, Dick Goodwin brought me close, and when we put out a record with the jazz ensemble, he asked me to kind of get involved in that and handle some of the administrative deals and the liner notes and the organization of getting that record out. And then Rod Kennedy, with Rod Kennedy Presents, he was very tight with Dick, and Dick was his contractor. And Rod was basically booking all the shows at the Municipal Auditorium and at that time, the Hogg Auditorium at University of Texas, as opposed to Bass Concert Hall or something like that. And then soon they're into also the Irwin Center was built. And then the Headliners Club, if you know what that is, very posh, exclusive private club. Vincent Ardenino was a part of that club. So Vince brought me in to assist him with hiring bands, big bands mainly, to back up the shows at the Headliners Club. Rich Little, Bob Hope, the comedians and singers of the day, early 70s, mid 70s, things like that. Then Dick Goodwin left to take the gig at South Carolina, and Rod Kennedy left town to go start the Kerrville Folk Festival. So all of a sudden, I had kind of been assisting everybody. And so everybody, I just knew they could call me to get things done. And that's the way it started. And then I was in the right place at the right time. My band played Symphony Square, and Jane Sibley, who was the president of the Jazz Society, they were looking for someone who could be not only the producer of the concerts at Symphony Square, but also the youth director for the Austin Symphony. And she just saw me there for lunch one day because they had that little sandwich shop at Symphony Square, which was the old New Orleans club, had been moved onto the site there. And she just said, "We want you to do this, take this job." I go, "Well, I don't really want a job." But I see the need here. So I interviewed with the manager, Don Roth, and Don said, "Well, I think you could do this, but I don't know if you want to do this." I said, "Well, I'll make a deal with you. I'll do this. Why don't we sign a contract for 7 months? That'll get us through the opening, and that'll launch, get through the whole season, and that'll launch the children's program, and maybe we find another youth director." And that 7-month contract lasted 17 years. So I was with the Austin Symphony for 17 years under contract to produce the shows. And then Bass Concert was built, and I was the guy to call. Plus, I got a phone number. My phone number is 477-7777. So that's an easy number for everybody to remember. And I think that helped also. It's like if they didn't remember my name, they remember my number. And but once again, the city was small. The city was 50,000 and 100,000 and 150,000. And what is it now? Close to 1 million people or something. And so it's just been a matter of, floating as the city's grown.
So tell me about the Elephant then.
The Elephant Room, I was I was a member of the Austin Federation of Musicians, the Musicians Union. And the union was great about giving free referrals. And, at one time, the union was very strong in this town. You didn't take any gigs. Nobody played door gigs. I had to get special permission from Charlotte McDaniels when Bento and the Fairlanes decided to take the door gig at Liberty Lunch to waive the minimum guarantee for that one and explain what was going on. But the union called and said, hey, there's a new club that's opening up. It's in a basement on Congress Avenue. Oh, okay. So a friend of mine called, Scott Hutchison, and from Little League, we're a longtime friend. And he also worked with me in the business before. And he was going to be in town. He said, let's go play tennis. And my business partner, Nancy Fly, even though it was my company, she was always kind of, where are you going? So, she was like keeping the boys in line, And so I kind of told a little fib. I said, I'm going to go check out this club. I was really going to play tennis. So I drove down Congress and I said, well, I feel kind of bad for fibbing to get out of the office, but I'll stop in and just check it out. And sure enough, Tony Campisi's space was available, the number one space. Tony used to drive around like for 2.5 hours until that space was available. And so I got the number one spot right at the top of the stairs, and I pulled in, went down, and they had just opened. It was the first day they were open. They didn't have any music or anything. And the waitress came over, and it was about 4:00, and she said, welcome to Elephant City, where you like. And I go, well, I'm just here looking at it, and here's my card. And she said, well, the owners are here in a meeting, so they might be interested in talking with you. So sure enough, Joppa, the owner, came over. He says, you book, he's from Belgium. And he says, you book music? I said, yeah. He said, well, what kind of music you book? I said, well, looks to me like you have a jazz club here. Oh, what, how much does this jazz music cost? And I said, well, you pay union scale, and I'll charge 10% to book it if you like it, and you don't have to pay me if you don't like it. And we started music 2 days later with Tomas Ramirez, Jazz Manian Devil. So Tomas played there on Thursday, Alex Koch and Rich Harney played on Friday. He had already booked all the Saturdays with a band that he liked, Stephen Doster and Tommy Elskis. They were a folk duo who played guitar and spoons. So it was Jazz Manian Devil, Worthy Constituents, Doster and Elskis, and then James Polk Trio on Sunday. And then we moved the jam there from Top of the Mark on the first Monday. And then Tony Campisi played the first Tuesday. And, I think probably John Mills probably played the first Wednesday. I can't remember everybody going back that far, although I've got the records. But that's how it started. And it just took off immediately. It was just such a cool vibe. And Doster and Elskis played 3 Saturdays, and then Joppa said, I think you book Saturdays too. I'll put them across the street at my Belgian restaurant called Gambrinus. And so they started playing Tuesdays over at Gambrinus. But one of the great things that happened early, there was a movie being shot in Austin with Clint Eastwood and Kevin Costner. And then Clint Eastwood started hanging out there. Like he was there, he was here, I don't know, a couple of months to shoot the movie. And he was down at the Elephant like 43 nights. And Kevin Costner was down there like at least 26, 27 times. So that inadvertently helped the word of mouth get around and stuff. And but Wynton Marsalis has come in to play after his gig at the Paramount. We've had Al Gray, Bill Watrous, tons of national names who have just come down to jam, and it's just like the local hang. And the difference between the Elephant Room and a Parker, for like when you go to Parker, I mean, that's a jazz club with curtains, and you shushed, or they don't shush you, but you know not to talk there. And you're going to dress, you're dressed with you dress up to go to Parker. And like this little club cast that we're doing for Elephant Room now. We haven't been able to shoot it yet, but we're going to go back and reshoot the opening where the sidewalk and the logo on the sidewalk. I want to have a variety of shoes walking by, people wearing nice dress shoes, boots, tennis shoes, sandals, goofy shoes. I've played gigs there. After a gig, a lot of times guys walk down there wearing their tuxedos. But I've also played a gig on stage fresh from our softball game. Me and Kerry Williams and back in the early days, even Bob Meyer and John Mills were on our softball team. And we'd come straight from the softball field and play a gig at the Elephant Room in our softball gear, So I look at the Elephant Room as a jazz bar. It's a bar, it's a hang. It's where people come to socialize and to drink, and it's more like a family. It's like a nighttime church.
That resonates. I understand that.
Yes, I know you do. I know because the fundraising efforts, the spirit of family, all that kind of stuff that's centered there. The Hall of Fame, Austin Jazz Society Hall of Fame. We used to have the induction ceremonies there before we have them at Shazy now.
And, Tony Campisi is still there, right?
Tony Campisi is still there. The remains, he used to introduce the band. He'd say, Jeff Helmer on piano, John Fremgen on bass, Scott Lanningham on drums. And I am the remains of Tony Campisi, the big chunky parts. And so when he passed away, we were having an estate sale at his house, and there was a young photographer had loved Tony and had taken a lot of pictures of him. And I sent her into the house to find we had a nice ornate urn, but it was too fancy. This wasn't Tony. And I said, go in there and find something. She came back out with 2 items. She came out with this beautiful piece of pottery. It was a piece of art that he had bought in Santa Fe. And then she also brought out this tiny sax case. And so we took his ashes and put some of them in the clay pot, gave them to his sister. I took some of them out to Riverbend Church and threw them in Remembrance Garden. I don't think I was supposed to do that, but I didn't know any better at the time. And we kept a little bit back in the sax case, and we mounted that on the wall. And at first we had it in a display case, and people kept bumping into it. And finally it kind of broke. We thought we'd replace the display case, but I don't think we need to. It's safe. And he's always there.
Now I'm looking at you've done all sorts of things in over 50 years in Austin, and you're really at the center of so much, and you're really an advocate for tremendous musicians and the musical life of Austin. Is there anything that stands out to you, whether a musical event or a business event or a particular hang that is sort of drives you and kind of becomes part of your soundtrack, thinking about your work and dedication to the life in Austin?
Well, I always go back to the very first jam on the East Side with James Polk, when he said, music is not a competition, just say what you have to say, shut up and sit down. Musically, and then the brotherhood from the UT Jazz Ensemble. I've got the on my wall up there, I've got the photograph of the UT Jazz Ensemble, and the guys in it of the 22 guys in the picture, probably 16 of them were top flight professional musicians, with at least a dozen based right here in Austin. It was a band of brothers that launched that. You know, the opportunity to be associated with the Austin Symphony, live at Symphony Square for 3 years, downtown Austin. But there would be stumbling out and walking into the Elephant Room, once again, a miraculous event. And, you know, I do feel that in so many ways, I just been blown in the wind with the hand, some guidance saying, go over here, go over there, go over there. And just putting your molecules in the right place at the right time has been something I paid attention to.
You've really been an architect for where we have come in Austin as it has grown almost exponentially. What hopes do you have for the next 50 years for Austin, musically or otherwise?
Well, I've always lived my life in chapters: 7 hours, 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, 7 years, 77 years, and 777 years. So as we look at the next 50 years, like I'm starting my 11th chapter going into 70 to 77. And I never even thought, many times I talked to John Mills about our retirement plans. And, both of us said, well, massive heart attack, right? Dropped dead, him late at night working on a chart. Me coming home from a softball game and then going out and playing a gig and hopefully finish the gig. And our retirement plan was basically death. Now we're in this forced retirement. It's like Gary Slechta called me to try to retire, saying, I can't do the Easter gig. I can't do the Mother's Day gig. I'm going to hang it up. I'm hanging up the trumpet. He hadn't missed one gig yet. He's terrible at retirement. It's like, but I do think that, like the Roaring '20s, when the pandemic of 1918, that music came back with a roar. And I got a feeling that the live music scene will return with a roar in Austin. I think that there's an organization, ATEC MAP, ATEX-M. I'm not really sure. I'm on the board, but I still don't know what the name of it is. But it's Nikia's group, Facebook group. And they're doing some really wonderful work. Pat Bukta and those guys are doing some great work. And they're very connected with the city. I also know that the city really wants to help. And they've never really been able to figure out exactly the best way to help. And so I'm thinking that with that organization being connected to the city coming out of the pandemic, there might be an opportunity to get on the right path with that, with some, how can the city best help? But I think that the real spirit of Austin and the music, I think it comes from the water from Barton Springs. I think it just comes right up out of the ground. And I got a feeling a lot more about this kind of stuff than I do. I don't know what I think about, churches and God, Jesus and stuff, but I do know that there's a spirit that we're all connected to. And with Austin, I think that spirit comes right out of the ground.
No, I think that's fascinating. And I want to ask you, you picked me as interviewer, so I'm going to ask you the stuff. Why 7? What's the connection to 7, 77, all that?
Well, I think that 7 is a lot of people's favorite number. Mickey Mantle was a big influence to me growing up. It's like he was a star. number 7, and it just 7 days a week. And why are people drawn to numbers? Once again, you probably know more about numerology than I do. You probably know a lot of stuff more than I do, actually.
No, I think 7 is just so interesting in terms of a cycle of a Sabbath and all of that. I don't know if you've ever thought of that particular connection to the 7.
Well, my name is biblical. My ancestry goes back to biblical times, Hebrew in origin. Although growing up in Denton, I thought that Jewish people were like the Samaritans, like a biblical characters that didn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. Denton was a small town, segregated. The first, our senior year was the first time that I was able to meet a black person. A black kid my age. When they, bust them in, it's like, okay, what's your name? Your name's Freddie. Okay, Freddie, I'm Mike, stuff like that. But he was on the football team. I was in the band. But we were, that was my first black friend. And so it was a homogenous Ozzie and Harriet experience growing up in Denton. But I got to UT, and I remember being in a hotel with Ron Brown, and he went on to play with Diana Ross and whatnot. And we were sitting in the hotel room, and we have a band of we're 9 guys would be in a hotel room, and everybody takes their. I was the leader, so I usually got the floor of the closet and private area, And but we were sitting around talking. We're talking about Saturday morning kiddie shows, and Ron wasn't saying anything. I said, involving him in the conversation, I go, so who was your favorite, Ron? He goes, well, I never went to a kiddie show. What do you mean? See, I wasn't allowed. And it's like, oh. So, it's one thing for, to think about the plight of a black person, but it's another thing, think about your good buddy, So.
Well, that's really, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I am curious. And since you've been such at the center of things, coming to Austin, getting involved in jazz and rock and all the fusion stuff that you talked about, did you know what you were getting into? What does jazz mean to you, actually? I'd love to know that.
Well, the freedom, from my perspective, it's the ultimate, because you got to be really good on your instrument. You have to have the classical skills, but then you got to get off the page and just get in touch with your inner self and blow. And music always has a function. And the function of music could be for a commercial, selling a product. It could be, let's all go to the movies. Let's buy some popcorn. And you got music that sells popcorn. You got music that sells, booze at a bar or creates an environment. You got a rock concert that blows you backwards and makes you, speeds up your heartbeat and pumps you up. You got music for late night romance. There's always a function of music. And I think that jazz musicians have that sensibility to do it all. And I think the jazz is kind of like the logical progression of combining all the elements of music. And at the same time, sometimes like a rock guy or a blues guy, you don't even have to read music. I did a clinic with James Moody, and he brought his piano player to the clinic. And it was a funny clinic because the kids at the college, they had me and James Moody, and I was there basically to talk about business and booking and how to behave, how to get gigs and what talent buying and all that kind of stuff, as well as playing my perspective on playing trombone. And then James was talking about the musical elements, but neither one of us have the lingo down. Like when I teamed up with John Mills, he was like 18 or 19, and I was the older guy. I was like 22. And so I don't have to, I've never had to learn theory, really. I can hear changes, but I don't really respond to changes. If somebody says, oh, well, this is going to be, play this, that, it's like, yeah, well, let's just hit the button. Let's go, and lots of times I'll turn to John and say, what's my first note, to get me into the deal. And John can probably explain my playing in musical terms far better than I could. It's kind of like the first time you see your solo transcribed. And Bob Meyer came in one time and he said, hey, check this out. And I'm looking at it. I go, well, I can't play that. And he said, you did.
That's fun.
Yeah. But, jazz is the ultimate. It is. And from my perspective, the trombone is my idol, my brass idol. And I love thinking about the trombone, and you got 7 notes. You've also got 7 harmonics, plus the false harmonics. And so it's totally fascinating to me, the trombone, and still is. But I never really played a solo. The reason I was at North Texas, and I was playing the third part in that band. Then when I came to UT, I was playing the lead part. And so in the trombone section, it's generally the second player that plays the jazz solos. In the rock band that I got into, Jimmy Pankow kind of stuff, you get a little rock 8-bar solo here and there. Then playing with Bento and the Fairlanes, once again, you're playing loud, high, fast, and not really playing over changes or things like that, other than like a 8-bar changes, take 32 bars over these 8-bar changes primarily. And so I felt like I could solo, but I realized I was almost 30. I never played a jazz quartet, like a J.J. Johnson type of gig. And so that's why I started the jam at Piggy's in 1980. I got lots of stories, and that's another story of Piggy's and how that place became a jazz club. And a very, terrific place for a while. But Piggy's, the popularity of Piggy's launched 6th Street. And at one point, 6th Street was mainly restaurants and jazz bars. I booked 6 jazz bars on 6th Street, from the Driscoll to the Oasis to Fish Market to Toulouse to Baxter's to Anchovies. There were 6 jazz clubs. I remember a Tuesday night, a guy from New York came in town, and very arrogant kind of guy. And he goes, you guys have any jazz in this town? I go, well, it's a Tuesday night. Let's see what we can find. So we went to 6th Street, and John Mills was playing at the Driscoll. Then Tomas Ramirez was playing at the Fish Market. There's a Dixieland band playing at Toulouse, a good Dixieland band, Randy Zimmerman. Then we ended up at the end of the street with Tony Campisi and Kirk Whalum at Baxter's. And the only place charging the cover was Kirk Whalum for $2. And so this guy walked down the street and he goes, I've heard some of as good of music as I could find in New York City in 3 blocks, and it only cost $2. So when 6th Street first got up, it was fern bars, restaurants, and jazz clubs. That's what it was.
Wow. And then you probably capped the night going over to the restaurant to hear that guy play spoons, right?
Well, this is before Elephant Room. Yeah.
No, I'm just joking. What are you listening to now?
Mainly what I'm listening to most of the time is Fable Records product. And also right now what I'm doing is kind of creating a soundtrack of my life, starting with the first recording from Denton High School, a jazz band. There was a college kid at North Texas who'd written an arrangement of Rainy Day, D. Barton's arrangement of Rainy Day, kind of a famous arrangement now. And it was relatively new at the time when I was in high school, and we played that and recorded it on our high school jazz ensemble record. And that was the first, other than the high school band recordings, that was the first record that I was kind of, involved in. And it was from the Brownwood Jazz Festival. And then the UT Jazz Ensemble, we put out a record. And once again, I didn't have a solo on either one of those, but, I would pick out songs that would kind of be a trombone section feature, And then with Starcross and going on into Bento and the Fairlanes, and then some other recordings with Dan Del Santo. And so I've been practicing a lot lately, and also going back and listening to old recordings to see what's changed and what has not changed in my own personal playing. So I've been kind of doing an introspective thing lately. And another record that I have played over and over and over, and still to this day regret not putting on Fable Records because he really wanted it on there, was Sandy Allen's record. Did you ever hear Sandy's record?
Mm-mm.
I didn't realize it at the time, but it was basically the story of his life from when I was a young boy in Chicago all the way through the ending song where good night everybody, and I have to make sure you get a copy of that. I've got some CDs left of that, but
That'd be great.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite recordings of my life, actually. Only one trombone piece on it, and I'm not getting a solo, but
Well, that's all right though.
It is all right.
That kind of introspection, I think, in this period specifically is really quite interesting, and hopefully it will propel you in the next series of sevens that you have to continue to be vital and inspirational, and to continue to be such a beautiful example to so many who are either starting out or depend on you for expressing their voice here and in other places as well.
Well, I think that it's funny to think about the next chapter, but we've always talked. I remember Bento Robert talking about this a long time ago. He said, I like to play gigs, but I don't like to leave my house. And he said, I wish there was a way I could just, record my part and send it in. Y'all can play along with it. And it's so funny now with John Mills times 10. You ask about that band, and Tony Campisi had the first big band to play at the Elephant Room. And then Bob Meyer had a band called the Concept Orchestra. So he said, well, I'd like to play on once a month at the Elephant Room. Okay. And then Paul Baker said, well, I've written a lot of charts for both these guys, and I'd like to start my own band. We'll call it Baker's Dozen, a 13-piece band. So all of a sudden, and then Monster Big Band came along, and so all of a sudden I realized it's like, well, we've got, 3 bands plus Tony's band, one more band on a Wednesday, and we could have a Wednesday night big band series if we wanted. And I asked John if he wanted to start a band, and because he'd written some of the 10-piece charts for Bob Meyer. And he said, yeah, I think so. I said, well, I'll bring Bob's book, and you don't have to write all of them, but, write some new charts, and, a couple of months we'll start the big band. And so a couple of months later, I walk in with Bob's charts in case we needed any. Didn't need a one. He'd written an entire night's worth of music in the 2 months to start that band. And now we got more music than we could possibly play. But, when I get off this Zoom call, I'll go upstairs and record a solo and some parts for this blues guy. Jay Weber has asked me to play on his, literally just phone it in. So we can now phone our parts in. Like with John Mills times 10, we did that little thing. You've seen it. That Hank mixed with, he said, I can figure that. Hank said, I can figure this out. Hank himself said, I can figure this out, and I'll download the program and figure it out. And he did. And it turned out quite well. So for some of us, phoning our parts in, which used to be a negative term, is now going to be a term of reality.
Well, who knew that Robert was a prophet?
Well said.
Do you have any thoughts or any questions or anything you want to ask or bring out before we close?
Well, all that you're doing also for the community, and you're a big part of this Hall of Fame, and the research that you do, the insights that you bring to all this, we really appreciate it.
Well, I'm honored to serve. I believe in jazz. I believe in the mission of Austin, and I believe in the efforts that you provide and so many others. And it's great to meet and go deep with some really amazing people, Hall of Famers from the Austin Jazz Society.
Well, I'm glad that we did this.
Me too. Thank you so much, Mike. I wish you continued vitality, good health, and either from your home or wherever, may you continue to play beautifully.
Thank you, Neil.
Absolutely.